Hello and welcome back to In the Dugout, and to another instalment in the so-called, best episode yet, of the Dugout debate. My name is Josh, and as always, I'm joined by my fellow presenters, partisans and pundits, and my pals to a certain extent, Chris and Alex. And no time to waste, let's just go straight into it with a round involving a picture. It is, of course, Picture This, with a lovely picture of the Arsenal bench. So, lads, picture this.
Well, I'm just going to start off by saying I'm deeply insulted that you didn't ask us how we were.
I don't really care. I'll be honest.
I've actually had a really tough week, and I really wanted to vent at the start of the podcast, but you kind of ruined it now.
All right.
It's only a half an hour programme, Huffrey.
Spill all my life.
Right, I'll start us off. I feel like this is showing Wenger and Sanchez. They've just been on a really shit amusement park ride, and this is the post-ride picture that they've had to pay like 10 quid for.
Those ones that are just on the screen.
Like that scene for the In-Betweeners.
Yeah.
Well, to me, it kind of looked more like Arsene Wenger at the front was a father on Jeremy Kyle, eagerly awaiting the results of the DNA test for his possible son sitting behind him.
Is Wenger sort of leaning over, so is he trying to hide the fact that he still can't unzip his coat?
To me, it looks more like the take that 30-year reunion, but Robbie's off high on crack again, so they had to just pull in some random bloke off the street to sit behind them and fill in.
No one could ever replace Robbie. I don't find that really funny. This is a serious issue.
I must say, Sanchez looks like he's just had to watch his beloved dogs be put down.
Oi, nah.
This is supposed to be light-hearted, Chris.
Those dogs are better than Alexis Sanchez. How dare you?
They're certainly more loyal. They're more loyal.
Ooh, prefacing the subject. No.
Any ideas on the actual answer?
Yeah, it's, of course, that's the bench from the Liverpool-Arsenal game, showing perhaps a little bit of tension between Arsene Wenger and Alexis Sanchez.
Yes, it's of course the rising gap between player Alexis Sanchez and manager Arsene Wenger during the Gunners' 3-1 defeat at Liverpool. So, well...
Finally!
I thought you were a Real Madrid fan now.
Well, let's face it, he'll probably be playing there soon.
Mate, to be honest, until we play Burnley next week and inevitably lose 3-0, I'm a Liverpool fan again, and then when we beat Man City having lost to Burnley, I'll be back again. It's all good.
Just support Barnet.
No, why would anyone put themselves
Where's
through
your
that?
Barnet shirt?
Well,
Josh, it's supposed to be the best episode ever. Stay on topic.
Well, stop interrupting me then, guys! So, back on course. Alexis Sanchez. Obviously, there's talk about him leaving Arsenal. He's not happy with Arsene Wenger, with his tactics, with the squad in general. He was left on the bench in the starting 11. Or he wasn't in the starting 11 at the weekend. Chris, I'll start with you. Do you think there's a good chance he's going to leave the Emirates come the summer?
If this continues, then it's highly likely because he has been Arsenal's standout player this season. You said in a previous podcast that he'd been an absolute sensation as a front forward man rather than being a winger.
A front forward man, is that the technical term?
It is the very technical term.
Can we say this is the guy that thinks that Moussa Dembele is a rising star, so come on. Give the guy a break.
I think Moussa Dembele would be a wonderful front forward man.
In the year 2020.
Carry on, Chris.
Budding career as a centre mid is cut short so that he can fulfill the dream of being a front forward man.
This isn't even the outfit. This is the actual programme. Do not adjust your set.
Chris, go on. Just keep going.
Oh, yeah.
Power through. We can do this.
I cannot for the life of me explain Arsene Wenger's decision to drop Sanchez. I mean, there's been talk that it was a bust up on the training ground or something like that, which we'd seen in the past earlier on in the season. I think it was with Diego Costa while he was angling for a move to China. So the same thing may be happening now with Sanchez, but Sanchez himself needs to improve his act, really, because on the money that he is on at a club like Arsenal, he needs to have a bit more respect for the manager, even if it's Wenger who's been just running Arsenal into this in this stagnant state, really.
Absolutely.
In fairness, like, not necessarily to interrupt. I didn't know if you were finished, but obviously not to interrupt. But I think that if you're Alexis Sanchez, I think that we've talked about like his priorities before. I think we've discussed on this podcast at some point before the fact that, you know, given his background, there is a likelihood that he is playing football to make that. Like, that is his prime thing, to make a living and support his family back home in Chile, because obviously he grew up from a very poor background. I think once that's out of the way, he's going to be able to support his family now. The guy wants to win trophies. He's good enough to win trophies. He is good enough to be part of a side that challenges and potentially wins the Champions League. He's absolutely brilliant. He's a cut above the rest of that Arsenal side. And I think that for a good part of the season when a lot of the Arsenal side were letting him down, he was still working his socks off. Even in the game against Liverpool, after a potential training ground bust-up, he came on and he was doing a great job in the game, and he was absolutely working his heart out. I don't think you can criticise his attitude too much. I think that it's not a similar situation to Dimitri Payet, where he just refused to play. Regardless of everything that's going on, he's still playing, and he's still playing his absolute heart out. And I think he just wants to win. And in that Arsenal team at the moment, there just seems to be no ambition. They're not matching the ambition that he shows. So I can understand why he's cut such a frustrated figure at the club at the moment.
The question I was going to actually pose to either one of you, I'll give it to you, Chris, because Alex, you just spoke. Are Arsenal capable of attracting the world's elite? You were saying that Alexis Sanchez is possibly thinking that Arsenal have no ambition. But let's just say Sanchez does leave. Who are they going to replace him with? And I'll just reiterate the question, can they attract someone of Sanchez's calibre still?
Not with Wenger still at Arsenal. That's just the long and short of it. Wenger will have to leave if Arsenal want to have any hope of going back to their former glory, especially of the Invincibles year. We've spoken on numerous occasions now about how Arsenal have just stagnated under Wenger.
Yeah.
They've won, very little for a team of Arsenal's calibre. And yes, you've seen players like Mesut Ozil and Alexis Sanchez join in recent years, but you'll need a new manager, a new face who can run the show if you want to bring in anyone who is truly world-class, because Ozil I wouldn't actually consider world-class because he always goes missing in those big games.
Yeah. I agree completely with that.
Sanchez is the only world-class player in that Arsenal side.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
And him alone is not enough to win a title. You need talent and quality all over the pitch, which Arsenal just simply do not have and will not have unless Wenger goes.
Arsenal arguably, in my opinion, have quality in maybe 4 positions. And this might be incredibly harsh, so feel free to argue with me if you disagree, but I still think Petr Cech's a good enough goalkeeper to be in a side that's really challenging. Maybe not for too much longer. I don't think he's as good as like a De Gea or a Courtois by any means, but he's solid. I still think Koscielny, when he has injury problems, but when he's playing, he's very solid, makes a difference. I still think Bellerin's good, but I think he might go to Barca. And I think Sanchez is good. And I think that's it. I think they have 4 players. Not maybe only Sanchez out of all of those is world class, and the other 3 are good. They're Champions League quality. Like, when you look at that team, Francis Coquelin should not be anywhere near a team challenging for top 4. If you guys watched the Liverpool Arsenal game, he was woeful. He made Emre Can look good, and Emre Can was terrible.
I thought he was still in Eden Hazard's back pocket.
To be fair, arguably yes. I think he's just been poor all season, and he can't step it up against the big clubs. So I don't think it's just the manager. I think there's so much wrong with that Arsenal team. I think they need to rebuild from the ground up. If I was an Arsenal fan, I would be prepared at this point to accept 2-3 years of perhaps missing out on top 4, but rebuilding the entire structure of the club from the ground back upwards in order to turn into a force again. Because they have the infrastructure to do it. They're a North London club that's always attractive to players wanting to come in, and they have the history for it. But I think they need to change quickly, because otherwise they're going to just continue to stagnate.
Whilst Wenger's time at Arsenal could be coming to an end, as is our discussion of the Gunners, and we're moving swiftly on to Leicester versus Hull. The Foxes beat the Tigers 3-1 at the King Power Stadium. My first question is to you, Alex. Obviously, we spoke last week about Claudio Ranieri's, in our opinion, unfortunate dismissal from the King Power Stadium, to put it lightly. Do you think that Craig Shakespeare could get the job full time, given that they've now won 2 on the bounce in the league, and that's apart from their win against Man City in December, that's their first league win in, I think it's 10 matches. Their first 2 league wins within 10 matches.
I think at this point you have to give them a chance. We touched on this last week. It's very difficult to point out who can really take that Leicester job and who would want to take that Leicester job. And I don't know that much about Craig Shakespeare, if I'm being completely honest. I don't know what his pedigree is. But, I mean, he seems to be doing an all right job. I think it's perhaps less to do with him and more the fact that clearly the players had lost confidence in Claudio Ranieri. We criticised the players for that, but regardless of what we think of it, they clearly lost confidence in him. And now he's gone. We saw Mahrez showing just a glimpse of what he showed us last season. And we know that he can be quality. And if anybody can get that out of him, and he manages to stay at Leicester and he performs, then I think you've got to give them the time of day to try and bring the best out of that side. Because I think if you can get the best out of them, they're not necessarily a relegation side. I think they're still going to have to fight for it.
Yeah.
But when you've had a club that's been that poor for that long and you come out and first 2 games bring out 2 wins, you have to give the guy confidence. Like, you have to back him. Because how much better can you do?
Well, Chris, Alex was alluding to the fact that it was as though the main core of the City players were stopped playing for Ranieri. So can you see any parallels between Leicester's title-winning side of last season and this season compared to the Chelsea winning side of 2015 compared to how they were last season under Mourinho?
Yeah, it's slightly different because of course Mourinho had the whole Eva Carnera situation, whereas here Ranieri resorted back to his nickname as the Tinkerman. He started messing around with that Leicester team, and I think it was last week, about how they'd done the complete opposite of what Leicester had done seasons before. Rather than going and properly scouting good, cheap players, they went the complete other end of the spectrum because their chief scout left to join Arsenal, ironically enough. And instead, we said that they splashed out money, wasted money on Islam Slimani, who's just not proven himself in the Premier League, in my opinion, at all.
If I go to both of you, obviously Leicester versus Hull, in the grand scheme of things, is not far off a relegation battle. We spoke about a few weeks ago, but if we have an update, who do you think is now in contention for relegation to the Championship?
Middlesbrough.
No, as in the 3 teams.
Yeah,
that's one team, Chris.
You've got a third of the way to
yeah.
the question.
Good try.
Just like Mr. Dembele is a third of the way.
Well, leave the Dembele jokes to us, Chris. We make them far better.
I still think
all you need is a good front forward man to fire you out of that box, really.
Ironically, it is the front forward man that Middlesbrough are lacking, because they're just not scoring enough goals. They've got Alvaro Negredo on loan from Valencia, but it's not enough. You need to have more proven Premier League goal scorers. And Borough if I'm right, they have scored the least amount of goals in the league this season.
I'm just having a look now for you.
For a team who have only just come up, you need to ensure that you can score in order to stay in the league. It is worth noting, just while you're saying that, you're right, they have scored the least, but they've scored 5 less than the next 2 least scoring teams, which are the 2 teams below them, Hull and Sunderland. They have also conceded at least 20 goals less than both of them.
This is great, but I was asked the name of 3 teams.
Yeah, I know.
It's a 3-point answer to give me an essay.
It's the way Aitor Karanka sets up his team. He sets up a team that is defensively solid and will not concede, but he needs to score. As for the other 2 teams, which are finally going to get...
Do it in 2 words, Chris. 2 words.
Hull and Sunderland.
Brilliant.
No explanation as to why. Alex, how about you?
Because we've got about
in 5 seconds, can you list your 3 teams?
I would say Sunderland, I would say Hull, and I actually think Middlesbrough will survive, and I think Crystal Palace will go down.
I actually agree with you there. Yeah, I'll leave that there, just to avoid being a hypocrite.
Here is my analysis of all of those teams.
So we'll move on now to the phrase of the week, which this week is an absolute disgrace. So, boys, What does that mean?
Boys. Boys. Chris, do you want to go first?
Not really.
Not really. There we go. That's not.
Can you stop quoting me?
No, I'll start. Is it? How did we all of us describe Ranieri's sacking last week?
Very passionately.
Yeah.
If you want to see more on that last Dugout debate, it hasn't been uploaded yet because Josh is lazy, but one day. Maybe.
I'm at a better university than you are, Lavery.
Yeah, actually, I think you technically are. Anyway, I was going to say an absolute disgrace is how I describe Chris's dress sense in these videos.
So last week it was how I describe his love life. This week it's how you describe his dress sense.
In my defence, I'm criticising Villa more so than Chris. This is less of a personal attack.
This entire episode is just a character assassination of Chris, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're right, it is the best episode.
Yeah.
Chris,
I never failed to deliver.
Is it? How would I describe the shadow deputy dabbing in Parliament?
How would everyone describe the shadow deputy dabbing in Parliament? It was horrible. If I'm not wrong, I believe that absolute disgrace was the word used to describe the initial reviews of the Roy Hodgson biopic that's hopefully coming out next year. Should be really great. I'm looking forward to it.
That is the one answer, Alex.
An absolute disgrace. No, it is of course how Jamie Carragher described Tyrone Mings' stamp on Zlatan Ibrahimovic.
Yeah, so obviously Bournemouth holding United to a 1-1 draw should have been the main talking point of the game. However, there was the red card that was and the two that weren't. So Chris, what do you make of that? We found out this afternoon that Ibrahimovic and Tyrone Mings are going to be getting, they've been charged by the FA. I think they're awaiting their actual their ban, or fine, whatever they're going to get. Do you think that Andrew Sermon deserved to be sent off firstly? And do you think that Zlatan and Mings were fortunate to avoid the same fate?
Well, Sermon certainly shouldn't have been sent off. I mean, it was hardly a shove. Ibra, he played it up a lot, but that's just Ibra, and not
any footballer would.
Any footballer would, like you've just said. As for Mings and Zlatan, they both should have gone. I mean, there was clearly clashes between the two of them. They were at each other the entire game, and they should have both gone off rather than Sermon. But I think this just highlights, like we've spoken about in the past, just the terrible refereeing we're seeing. I mean, he'd shown Sermon a second yellow, and then didn't.
I honestly thought we were going to see another Graham Poll moment.
Graham Poll.
I was honestly thinking that, because if you look what the commentary said, Martin Tyler was like, "Hasn't he already booked Sermon?" And I was like, "I'm not sure." And then about a minute and a half later, it's like, "Yeah, he's going to send him off now." I was like, "Oh no." What are you going to say, Alex?
Fair, just while we're on the topic of 4 yellow cards, I know we're not going to go to it. We've already talked about Arsenal. If you guys watched the game, Emre Can avoiding being sent off for what should have been a Stonewall red card. I don't know if he actually was injured or whether he's pretending to be injured, but he sort of rolled around a bit, hobbled off the pitch and avoided getting a second yellow. He was already on a yellow card and absolutely clattered, I think it was either Oxlade-Chamberlain or Walcott. I don't know. I'm not racist, I promise. I just can't remember which one.
Alex, you're absolutely right. That had absolutely nothing to do with what we were talking about.
No, but
Yeah.
But we're talking about poor refereeing.
Why don't you also explain about how Borough are going to go down?
In 3 words. Nah. But yeah, the refereeing decision, it's just, like Chris says, it's just literally another example of horrendous refereing decisions which have basically been scattered across the entire season. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean...
That's
the whole... I was actually going to move on to refereeing decisions in... Well, can you blame Mark Clattenburg for jumping ship? Essentially,
he's not gone quite yet.
But look, he's going to. He claims that there's all this pressure on referees to get the decisions right, and that's why he's leaving not just the country but the continent.
Well,
are the referees not actually to blame for getting decisions wrong, or is it the media and all the fans that are putting pressure on them? Because it's not just one decision that the referee at the weekend was getting wrong. He was getting decision after decision wrong. The Serb one was questionable because it's a second bookable offence. How he missed the Zlatan and the Tyrone Mings incidents is beyond me, and to not send them off or not have any of his assistants helping him in that decision making, is it not actually vindicated to say that referees deserve all the criticisms that they're getting?
You like short, snappy answers, Josh, so I'll give you 2 words. Video replays. That is all I can say. I don't care about the tradition of the game at this point. I care about having fair results. The league should be a fair league. And I think that referees do get a lot of stick. I think there are some decisions that referees should be blamed for getting wrong because they're just terrible decisions. I think that I obviously I wasn't there. I didn't have the referee's view, but the decisions, the fact that none of the assistants and the referee managed to spot that both of the Ibrahimovic and Mings fouls were red card offences is beyond me. And the Emre Can one was a stonewall red card that the referee just didn't give because he hobbled off injured. It was 100% a red card. And I think that those kind of decisions the referee should be blamed for, but there are plenty of decisions where it's just incredibly difficult to give it.
Yeah.
Like the Southampton offside goal, for example, tough view, lots of players in the box in the EFL Cup final. That's a really difficult decision to make, and the linesman and the referee got loads of stick for that. I just think all of this would be solved by video replays. I say it every week. I can't find a reason that we don't have video replays yet.
Another ridiculous decision from this week alone. The penalty that was awarded to Burnley when they played Swansea. I mean, it quite clearly came off, I think it was Robbie Brady's hand. But the referee is like, oh no, claret and blue is the exact same colour as white. I'm going to book out Dawson.
A final point on this, just to sort of bring us back to the match in question. Do both of you agree with Jamie Carragher's statement that Tyrone Mings' challenge was worse than Zlatan's, and that actually Mings had it coming to him?
It's hard to say because when you look at the replays, Mings isn't actually looking where he's stepping. He may have had a little glance just before he got up and moved on. But I think he's looking off to his left because there's a cross coming in or something like that. And he catches Ibra's head, of course, which, I mean, intentional or not, it should be a card. But then Ibra's incident is quite clearly deliberate. I mean, in his post-match interview saying that Mings jumped into his arm. I mean, come on.
It's such a Zlatan quote, though, isn't it?
It is such a Zlatan quote.
It's quintessential Zlatan, but should have been sent off, the both of them, like we've said.
And do you agree with that, Lafrey?
I think it's quite difficult because both of those, in the moment for the referee, could be perceived to be accidental. Sometimes, in terms of Ibrahimovic's, it's obviously like when you see a video replay of it. Now, when we see the replay of it after the game or during the game as spectators, it's quite obvious that it was deliberate.
Yeah.
Or it seems to be anyway. But sometimes players do just jump with their. If you push out with your arms when you jump, it gives you more lift. That's a fact. And it's entirely possible from the referee's perspective to that point that Ibra is literally just jumping to get the ball, and that Mings just jumps after and happens to catch his elbow. So that's a really difficult decision to make. Equally, if I'm not wrong, and I'm trying to picture it in my head, wasn't Rooney in front of Mings when he stepped up, and Mings stepped over Rooney and stepped up?
And Rooney supposedly scored the incident. Even though he was looking completely the other way, yeah.
Ref looking for the bloody free kick.
Yeah, so I think in hindsight it's very easy to see that they probably should both be in red cards, but I think describing the decision as an absolute disgrace is a little bit harsh because it's in that moment you have to understand it's very easy to see why it's such a difficult decision to make, and it's such a controversial decision to make to send a red card, especially for someone jumping. So it's a very difficult one, I think, for the referee.
So moving from one world-class striker who's proving himself in the Premier League in Zlatan to another in Harry Kane, who has been proving his doubters wrong, that he's not a one-season wonder and he's actually capable of producing it in numerous seasons. Alan Shearer, in fact, said that he thinks he could surpass his 260-goal Premier League record. So in light of that, for the Dugout Debate topic this week, we're going to be discussing who we think is our best or worst, depending on how you look at it, one-season wonder of the Premier League era. So we'll start with Chris, then go to Alex, and then I will give my own answer. So Chris, who's your one-season wonder of the Premier League era?
My one-season wonder is Senegalese Newcastle, or former Newcastle player, Papis Demba Cissé. He joined the Magpies in January 2012 to partner up with Alex's least favourite player, Demba Ba.
One of my least favourites. I wouldn't say it's my least favourite. White Gale's probably a little bit higher on that list than Demba Ba.
Yeah, really? Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, we'll discuss it afterwards.
Yeah, still.
He joined joined midway through the season, played in 14 Premier League games for the rest of that season, he scored 13 goals, including his quite magnificent brace against Chelsea. And that was a key reason as to why Newcastle ended up finishing 5th that season. And then every season afterwards at Newcastle, his form just absolutely plummeted. I mean, the following season, he only scored 8 throughout the entire campaign, compared to 13 in half a season the season before. And I mean, these sorts of names get touted a lot at clubs, but he was touted as the heir to Shearer by a lot of Newcastle fans.
They do look alike.
It's of course a massive ask, that, but Papi Cisse was never going to achieve that, and he never achieved anything that he did like that first half season with Newcastle. So that's why he is my personal best, worst one-season wonder of the Premier League.
Alex?
I'm going to go for Jamie Vardy, which is
okay.
a little bit controversial, obviously, because we're off the back of, the season where he was so brilliant. But I'm struggling to think of anybody who's seen such a colossal fall from grace as Jamie Vardy. I mean, he went from playing for Steelers or somewhere like that.
Bridge Park Steels.
Stockbridge Park Steels, to a couple of seasons later playing in the Premier League, almost getting the Golden Boot, being pipped to the post by Harry Kane, going to the World Cup with England, which could have probably never happened to him in his wildest dreams, and being 8th in the Ballon d'Or short.
It wasn't the World Cup, but I'll let that slide.
This is Euros, sorry. To being a colossal disappointment this season. Everybody it's difficult to say whether everyone expected so much from him. He played so much above the level we would expect from him. He doesn't seem to be that technically good. He's quick, he gets around the defence, but he's just been absolutely rubbish this season, much like most of the Leicester teams. So just because it's such a colossal fall from grace, he's my one-season wonder.
I'm going for Roque Santa Cruz, who he started off pretty well in his Premier League career at Blackburn Rovers in 2007. He racked up 19 goals in his first season at the club, which is pretty good for a team of Blackburn's stature, should we say, ignoring their Premier League win.
Right. They finished 7th that season, I think Blackburn finished.
They may well have done. But then things just didn't really progress from there. Let me have a look. He got 4 goals in the next season, which somehow earned him a move to big money Man City, where his career never really picked up. And then he ended up he went to Spain for a bit. I think he had a stint back in Paraguay. So he never really built on that one season, despite the fact that he'd had I think 4. He also returned to Blackburn. I think he had 4 and a bit seasons in the Premier League to have built upon what he started in that first season. He never really did. He went so far backwards. He ended up back home. So for a multitude of reasons, which I will go on to further discuss, I'm going for Roque Santa Cruz. So Alex, you want to start picking apart our arguments? Or try?
Yeah, sure. I'm trying to figure out where to start. Instead of picking apart your arguments, I just kind of want to make a comparison between Jamie Vardy and the 2 players you've picked, and why I think Jamie Vardy is perhaps more of a important choice. Because for me, the difference between Jamie Vardy and your 2 players is that Jamie Vardy, they all kind of played for clubs that weren't at the time doing hugely well when they were signed. Newcastle were doing all right, I think, when they signed Papi Cisse. But Jamie Vardy's one season where he was good was so much higher profile and had so much more to it than, in my opinion, Santa Cruz's and Papi Cisse's. I mean, he broke Ruud van Nistelrooy's record scoring in how many goals? I think it's
11.
Was it 11? 11. He scored in 11 consecutive games. He made headlines. And like I say, he was a player that had been playing non-league football only a few years before, who was now nominated for, was 8th in the running for the Ballon d'Or. That is such a colossally out of the ordinary season. And to go from being voted for amongst the likes of Lionel Messi, Luis Suarez, Robert Lewandowski. I have a feeling he might have actually finished above Robert Lewandowski in the voting, but that might be wrong. To being arguably, at the moment, what many people are saying is one of the Premier League's most disappointing strikers at the moment, is such a fall from grace, in my opinion, that it just makes him I can't comprehend someone being more of a one-season wonder for having had so much of a fall from grace.
Well, I'm not. What is his record of goal scoring this season so far? Do you?
Let me have a look. I think he might have scored 6 in the league, maybe, which I appreciate is more than Santa Cruz scored.
That was exactly my thinking behind it. I think the thing is with Jamie Vardy and the Leicester's win, because with each season of the Premier League, it becomes more high profile, there's more money invested, there's more prestige put onto a top scoring player. Say Kevin Phillips, who I was thinking about going for in 1999-2000, where he was the top scorer, he got 30 goals, won the only Englishman in history to win the European Golden Shoe. You know, most people don't even know who the hell he is. Whereas Jamie Vardy, I know that Jamie Vardy won the title, and as that will increase his profile to a certain extent. But I think just the nature of football nowadays would point to the fact that he's more recognised and that he probably would warrant more awards. There's more awards that he could have earned, and he just warrants more prestige in general. But if we then take Papis Cisse, just taking Vardy out of it for a second, going to Papis Cisse, I don't even think Cisse was a one-season wonder. It was just about a half-season wonder. If you take that half season that he was there, and then they finished 5th, which is remarkable, it was after that, going to the next season, that he completely fell apart. So, to say he was a one-season wonder, I'm not so sure. He probably just had a decent spell. Something like, I think Amir Zaki probably had a decent spell when he was at Wigan, and I wouldn't call him a one-season wonder. He just had a good run of form. So I would probably argue that yes, Papis Cisse didn't extend on what he'd done at Newcastle, but that wasn't something that he'd built up over the course of an entire season. It was something that he'd built up just on arriving at St James's Park in the January, and then completely forgetting all knowledge of how to improve your career come August.
But
If you want the exact statistics,
surely the fact that it's the impact he's had on Newcastle has taken place over a shorter amount of time, and what he did with Newcastle for that season was a 5th place finish for Newcastle was incredible.
Yeah, but that's not over the course of an entire season, though.
I'm happy to admit that, but the fact that it's taken place over a shorter spell of time, and then it's had this similar fall from grace, that's got to speak some sort of...
I'm not disputing that the impact he had on Newcastle during that period of time was great. And if you want to relatively compare the time frame that he was scoring the goals compared to Santa Cruz and Vardy, you could argue that his impact was pretty good. But to call him a one-season wonder, I think it's the issue of the actual title, one-season wonder. That's what I'm taking issue with, because... someone like Federico Makeda, who scored that wonder goal against Villa in 2009, and he had a run of a few good games after that. That you can't call him a one-season wonder. He just had a good spell when he broke into the team and didn't build on that. So obviously Papis Cisse was that, but on a much larger scale and obviously far better. But I think the point still stands that there's a difference between having a good run of form, albeit in a shorter period of time, than continuing it over an entire season, maintaining that, and then losing it the following season.
I think the issue with Papis Cisse as well is that normally you could sit there and say, it's saying it's half season wonder instead of one season wonder is a bit of a menial point if there weren't so many players in the Premier League, even today, who had good half seasons and then completely tailed off for the rest of the year. Like, for example, I'm thinking back, it was either last season or the season before where Cesc Fabregas looked like he was going to smash the assist record for Chelsea in the first half of the season.
Yeah, it was when they won the title, I think, season before last, yeah.
And then he got like 3 assists in the second
half.
Mesut Ozil, even at the start of this season, everyone was like, Mesut Ozil's really showing his quality now, and then he tailed off again. I think that we see like a lot of players have good half seasons, and it would be so much of a menial point if it wasn't such a consistent pattern. That's my only issue. I think you still have to appreciate PCC in the argument. It's not like saying Moussa Dembele is an exciting prospect. It's still very much an argument worth making. But I think it does dent it a little bit. The fact that so many players do have those good half.
But I think it's a question of, are you in form or having a good season? You see, it's the whole question of form is temporary, class is permanent. And for me, form isn't an entire season. form is a few months. It's your performance within a few months, which is essentially what Pape Cisse was doing. I don't know where about in January he joined. Let's say he joined mid-January, and the season finishes in mid-May. So that's 4 months. And there's, I think, 5-6 other months of the season that he's missed out on. If you take Roque Santa Cruz, I know that he scored more goals. If you sort of average it out, he would have scored more goals per game than Santa Cruz did, granted. But same with Jamie Vardy. Jamie Vardy's incredible run was over in the course of an entire season. He's maintaining that form for the entire season. Roque Santa Cruz maintaining the form for the entire season, whereas Pape Cisse was maintaining the form, which is only form, for a small period of time. And I think that's personally where I find issue with Pape Cisse being branded a one-season wonder in its purest form.
It is a bit hard to say, oh, perhaps his form could have continued had he joined in summer and had that sort of run, because of course the season ends in May and you're not going to be playing any games until your pre-season stuff in June, July. But I'm to paraphrase the great Andy Tate, I'm going to lose on the technicality of the actual phrasing of the question.
Of a legend that recommended it. Basically, me.
To be fair, I'm having a look at Santa Cruz's stats now, and I know we're talking about Premier League one-season wonders in the truest form of being in the Premier League, but looking at Santa Cruz now, and we take these are quite informal debates. Josh takes them a bit more seriously, but I'm looking at that. But he is, in terms of his entire career, the truest form of a one-season wonder I've ever seen in my life. He's had a 20-year career. He's still playing now, bear in mind. He's had a 20-year career and scored over a fifth of his goals in that one season for Blackburn Rovers in his 20-year career.
If you bring the history into it, then I'm not massively sure on Jamie Vardy, but certainly Pape Cisse was. I think Cisse was second top scorer in the Bundesliga when he was at Freiburg in the 2010-11 season. So
Vardy was banging them in all over the place, especially after. I think it was when he was at Fleetwood.
Yeah.
We're talking about goals, not UK's, Chris.
Yeah, I know. Like 31 goals for Fleetwood.
But I think there's a difference between playing for Fleetwood and then playing in the Bundesliga.
Oh, of course.
Obviously he scored goals, but I think it's slightly obscure to compare. I think were they in League? I think they must have been in League 2 or even the Conference at that point.
They were in the
yeah,
they won the top.
banging 30 goals in compared to I think he got 22 goals in the Bundesliga.
Just to say about Jamie Vardy, though, the thing that for me puts Jamie Vardy above Roque Santa Cruz is the fact that Roque Santa Cruz came into the Premier League and in his very first season in the Premier League was brilliant. And then he had 3 more seasons in the Premier League, I think, 1 with Blackburn, 2 with Manchester City before moving on, and was poor in the rest of those seasons. So it was almost like he came into the Premier League. Yeah, I know you say playing over the season isn't form, I agree with you, but it almost seems like he got lucky in the same way that Michu did. But that's his first season. He had 1 good season, then tailed off. Jamie Vardy's one-season wonder came in the middle. It's sandwiched between 2 poor seasons. It's not just he comes in, hits the ground running, and then tails off. In the previous season, he played 34 games for Leicester in the Premier League and scored 5 goals. He then played 36 games last season and scored 24, and this season has scored 7 in 24. Like, that is a true one-season wonder in the sense of you can see it sandwiched between 2 of what you would expect is 2 seasons where he's hitting the kind of form you would expect him to. And the season of, obviously, last season, not only for him, but obviously for the whole of Leicester, but stands out so much in comparison to every other season that he's had in the Premier League, the 2 that is sandwiched between. And for me, that makes him, in terms of if we're just talking about a purely Premier League one-season wonder, I think if we were talking about a one-season wonder in terms of their entire career, I'd probably give you Roque Santa Cruz. In terms of a pure Premier League one-season wonder, I think that puts Jamie Vardy, I think that gives him the edge.
One last thing, I think we're probably running out of time. One last thing I will just sort of...
Yeah, fair.
I will add in. Would you... I'll direct it mainly at Alex, it's his player, but obviously Chris, feel free to answer as well. Would you put Leicester's dip in form down to Jamie Vardy's lack of form or another factor, i.e. N'Golo Kante? Because for me, Blackburn, I think they sort of had Benny McCarthy around the same time they had Roque Santa Cruz, and then Benny McCarthy was sort of a less...
Was Benny McCarthy Was he the South African?
Yeah, he was sort of a lesser. I think he might have even come beforehand. He was around the same time. I think with Roque Santa Cruz that he was the main focal point of that Blackburn team, probably Morton, Gamps, Pedersen aside. Whereas with Leicester, they had a lot of players contributing to that Leicester side. Whereas if you take Roque Santa Cruz and the impact that he made to that team for the entire season out of the equation, then you see what happened to them. They ended up getting relegated. Whereas with Leicester, I think it's not so much the Vardy factor that's... Obviously, we can't ignore the fact that it's contributed to a certain extent. But if you take... Vardy is a factor and not the factor. And what do you make of that? Do you agree, disagree?
I think... honestly, I would say it's a very fair point. I would agree that's a very fair point. What I would say about Vardy, though, is that, yes, the entire Leicester team did contribute more so than perhaps the Blackburn team did. So Roque Santa Cruz, in a sense, to put it briefly, was more of a cut above the rest of the Blackburn team than Jamie Vardy was perhaps for the rest of the Leicester team. Yeah?
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely.
But equally, I think that obviously Leicester were never going to replicate last season because it wasn't just down to the Vardy factor. I totally agree with you there. But if Vardy was hitting the same kind of form that he was last season, it's not like Leicester would still be sitting where they are now.
No.
If Jamie Vardy was still hitting the same form as last season, Leicester would probably be top half the table. Like, that's how much his goals meant to that team. Like, as Mahrez was contributing with a lot of goals, don't get me wrong, but most of the goals from that team were Jamie Vardy. And I think that that run, I think his goals were key to their confidence as well. I think getting those goals consistently, those run of consecutive games, were so huge that season. And I think he provided as much confidence as he did goals, just because of the way he was doing it so consistently. And I think it's that consistency that Leicester are missing. And I think that whilst your point stands that Santa Cruz perhaps made more of an individual difference to that Blackburn team than Jamie Vardy did, I don't think that takes away from the fact that Jamie Vardy, in and of himself, if you take the team out of the equation, had such an abnormally good season last season compared to his other seasons. And I think in the true sense of a one-season wonder, you have to look at the player instead of the team. So I would accept your point about the team, fair enough. But I think Jamie Vardy didn't just provide goals, he provided confidence last season. And I think that if we're talking about one-season wonder, we have to look at the player. And those two things were so crucial to Leicester's season that I think you have to look at him as the key one-season wonder.
Chris, you got anything to just add to that finally?
Not really.
Good answer, because we're running out of time. So that does...
Yeah, I waffled a little bit there.
That wraps up the second of what I like to call the best episodes yet. Would you agree with Chris, with Alex, or with myself in saying that either Papi Cisse, Jamie Vardy, or Roque Santa Cruz were the best/worst one-season wonder in Premier League history? Or do you agree with anything else it says throughout the programme? Feel free to leave your comments, like, follow, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and until next week, we'll see you later.
See ya.
There we go. Good episode once again. For more footballing news and views, like, follow, share, and subscribe.